All rise. The words snapped through the courtroom like a whip. All the chairs scraped back in perfect synchrony, the noise like a thunderstorm sweeping across the wooden floor. The courtroom dropped into a strangling silence, the kind that makes your chest thump and your hands sweat. The cameras snapped frantically, their flashes lighting up the polished walls and throwing instant, sharp shadows across every face. Reporters crouched over their notebooks, poised to catch every moment. The air was electric, charged, as if the building itself sensed something historic was about to occur. And then the door swung open. Kody Brown entered. For an instant, time froze. He strode slowly, intently, his boots ringing off the tile with every step. His suit was crisp. Too crisp, like a man who wished to exude mastery even when all around him was spinning out of control. His expression was serene, nearly blank, but his eyes were another matter. They flitted back and forth across the room, looking for something or someone in the crowd, like a man seeking an ally, or perhaps an exit. There was a flash of terror there, hastily covered, but not hastily enough. Phones vibrated. Reporters murmured to one another. A woman gasped softly in the back. This wasn't just another day in court. This wasn't just another celebrity controversy that would blow in and out. This was the trial. The one that might destroy everything Kody had worked for. Everything he had presented to the world about his life, and reduce it all to ashes before the eyes of millions of viewers. He walked over to the defendant's table and sat down carefully, adjusting his tie. He did not glance back at the gallery, not at the cameras, not at the people, not even at the row where his family was sitting, stiff and silent. He just stared directly ahead, like a man tightrope walking over a bottomless pit. The judge entered, a pillar of stern authority, and everyone sat. The room seemed cramped, too cramped for the feelings it contained: anger, betrayal, curiosity, fear. The tension was so palpable you could taste it. Everyone in that courtroom understood that this was not going to be a subdued day. The prosecutor shuffled papers and whispered in an urgent tone. The defense nodded toward Kody, whispering something that was intended to comfort him, but he didn't shift, didn't nod. His jaw was clamped, his fists folded so tightly the knuckles were pale. And then the indictment was read. Fraud, betrayal, mismanagement of family assets. Each word thudded like a gunshot. Gasps erupted around the room. Some people covered their mouths with their hands, incredulous. Others whispered, passing theories that this was the script to an episode of a TV drama. Except this was not staged. And the guy sitting there was not an actor. Across from him sat the women who had shared his life. Some of them looked away, not meeting his eye. Others glared at him in open hatred, their faces white but their bodies braced. One of them, Christine, had her fists bunched in her lap, her lips compressed so tightly they were white. Another, Meri, sat rigidly upright, chin raised like a queen refusing to curtsy. Robin, the final one to glance up, wiped at her eyes hastily, as if she didn't know whether to cry or glare. The judge's tone was steady, but each syllable had the authority of finality. Kody Brown, you are charged with swindling your own family, with mishandling funds placed in your care, and with violating the trust that united you. How do you plead? There it was, the sunburst everyone had awaited. The whole courtroom leaned forward as if they couldn't breathe until he spoke. Kody finally did move. He glanced at the judge, then the jury, and for a moment his mask faltered. You could see the terror, the wariness, perhaps even a glimmer of guilt. Then he said it. Not guilty. The words echoed, loud and clear, and for an instant the room was silent, absolutely silent. And then the madness began. Reporters rushed for their phones. One of the people in the back let out a huge, stunned laugh. The wives muttered anxiously to one another. Social media notifications went off as live tweeters posted the words to the world. Not guilty. The trial hadn't even really begun, and already it seemed like war was being fought there. Not to mention throughout the internet, throughout living rooms where members of the family's fan base were gathered, arguing, taking sides. The judge struck the gavel, calling for order, but the energy could not be contained. It was too large, too raw. Kody rocked back in his chair, his expression unreadable now, the mask firmly secure. Whatever tempest was raging inside of him, he wasn't going to let anyone observe it. Not yet. The wives observed it, the jury observed it, and so did every single viewer sitting at home. It wasn't merely about money. It wasn't merely about business. It was about trust. It was about betrayal. This was about a family that had presented the world one face send smiling, united, strong send, and was now being compelled to show the world what actually lived behind closed doors. The trial of Kody Brown had commenced, and nobody in that room, nobody looking in from the outside, had any notion of just how volatile it was going to turn. The whispers hadn't even faded away when the judge motioned for the courtroom to quiet. The gavel thudded once, twice, hard as shots, until the buzz finally ceased. The hush crept back in, but now it was thicker, more oppressive. Everybody knew what was coming. The charges, the judge responded, looking down from the bench with a face that revealed nothing. The prosecutor, a tall, serious-looking man in a dark blue suit, rose and took a step forward. His voice was distinct, each word measured. "Your Honor, members of the jury, you will learn today about a man who appeared before the world as a doting father, a dedicated husband, and head of a family. But off camera, off stage, he was something entirely different. Today you will hear the real Kody Brown." Gasp whispers spread through the gallery. The prosecutor didn't hesitate. He will listen to how he manipulated family finances, how he treated business accounts as his playground, how he kept money from the people who trusted him the most. This is a case of betrayal. Betrayal of trust. Betrayal of family. Betrayal of the image he marketed to the world. Kody sat rigid, his jaw set, but his fingers drumming against the table ever so faintly. It was the lone indicator that he felt anything at all. The prosecutor went on, his words landing with the force of hammer blows. "We will have evidence, bank records, emails, taped telephone conversations, that demonstrate a pattern of dishonesty. You will see the paper trail that takes you directly back to this man." He faced the jury, and his finger pointed directly at Kody. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is not an accounting mistake. This is about a man who thought he was above the law, a man who placed himself above the very family he said he was protecting." The room hummed once more, reporters wildly typing away, phones flashing with alerts, as outsiders to the courtroom tracked each phrase in real time. Then came the part everyone was waiting for. The witness list. The prosecutor read it slowly, letting each name hang in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Meri Brown, Janelle Brown, Christine Brown, Robin Brown. Every name was like a thunderclap. Kody's head swiveled slightly in the direction of the row where his wives were seated, his face flashing. Shock, anger, dismay. It was difficult to discern. Meri held her chin high. Christine crossed her arms, going so far as to challenge him to look at her. Janelle sat very still, her face serene but inscrutable. Robin's eyes welled, her lips compressed into a thin line. "These women will testify," the prosecutor stated. "They'll explain to you how they found the money missing, how they confronted him, and how he reacted. They'll tell you the truth about the man sitting here." The gallery burst into whispers. This was no longer about figures and papers. This was about the family itself disintegrating before everyone's eyes. The prosecutor took a step back, allowing the gravity of his words to settle. And then the defense had a turn. The clean-cut man with quick eyes and Kody's lawyer stood up and zipped his jacket. He made his way to the middle of the room slowly, purposefully, as if he had nothing but time. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he started, his voice silky, near serene. "What you've just heard is a tale, a good tale, I'll admit, dramatic, emotive. But that's all it is, a tale." He brought his gaze fully around to the jury. "My client is not a thief. My client is not a con man. My client is a man who has been living his life under a microscope for years, who has been living for the cameras, juggling the demands of an enormous, complicated family." Are there arguments? Yes. Are there offended feelings? Of course. Hurt feelings are not a crime. Misunderstandings are not a crime. He stood there for a moment, pacing slowly in front of the jury box. "The prosecution would like you to think that this is a fraud case. It's not. It's about anger. It's about resentment. It's about a family breaking up and trying to find someone to blame. And after you listen to the evidence, you will agree that this man is innocent." He nodded towards Kody, who finally raised his head and locked eyes with the jury for the first time since the hearing started. His face was tranquil now, almost brazen. "I did not steal from my family," Kody blurted out abruptly, shattering the silence. His voice was low but clear enough for all to be able to hear. "Everything I did, every choice I made, was to guard them, to take care of them, to keep us intact." The gallery came alive again. Some faces relaxed, other faces stiffened. Social media, undoubtedly, was already divided right down the middle, some hailing him as a hero, others a villain. The defense attorney nodded at him, then resumed addressing the jury. "The evidence will speak for itself," he replied, "and when it does, you will see that this case isn't about fraud. It's about a family that couldn't agree on how to move forward, and now they want to punish the man who tried to lead them." He took a seat and the room grew quiet once more. No one stirred for a moment. The judge jotted something down on her pad. The court clerk shuffled papers. And then, in a soft voice, the judge said, "Call your first witness." The words fell like a spark onto tinder. Everyone sensed this was where things would truly start to come apart. Christine was called first. She stood up slowly, nearly ritually, and walked to the stand. Her heels clicked on the floor with each step, the sound echoing like a drum beat, leading up to the explosion everyone was aware was imminent. Kody observed her, his expression void but his gaze fixed on everything she did. She ignored him as she lifted her hand to swear. The courtroom waited, and she sat down and was prepared to give the world her version of things. Christine breathed deeply before she spoke, and the whole room leaned in as though tugged by an unseen string. Her voice was a soft whisper at first, barely vibrating, but each word dropped like a stone cast into quiet water, rippling out across the courtroom. "I adored him," she spoke softly, her eyes locked on the prosecutor. "I trusted him. We all did. We believed in the dream he peddled us. A dream of one family united, shared lives, a secure future for all of us and the kids." She hesitated, her lip barely trembling. But off-camera, off-show there were secrets. Decisions made in secret. Money that could have gone to the children, to the group homes, to food, just vanished. The prosecutor nodded slightly, urging her to continue. "Christine," he said, his voice soothing, "can you describe to the jury what you learned?" She swallowed, nodded. "Yes. It began small. I realized bills weren't being paid on time. Odd things, lost payments for utilities, school fees, doctor bills. When I mentioned it to Kody, he'd simply brush it off. 'Don't worry,' he'd tell me. 'I've got it under control.'" She cut a fleeting glance at Kody, who sat frozen in his chair at the defense table, his eyes fixed on the shiny wood as if it contained all the secrets. "But it wasn't dealt with," Christine went on, her voice strengthening now. "One day I managed to get into some of the accounts. I wasn't allowed to, but something inside me forced me to take a look. And what I found..." Her voice cracked. She hid her face for an instant, the courtroom utterly still, except for the far-off clicks of cameras recording every tear. "What did you see?" the prosecutor asked softly. Christine dropped her hands and gazed directly at the jury. "Money being deposited into accounts that we didn't even know we had. Thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. And not once, but time and time again. When I questioned him, he became upset. He told me I didn't have a clue how the money worked, that I was acting on emotions." She swallowed hard, her words shaking. But it wasn't emotion, it was math. The numbers didn't lie. Some of the jurors looked at each other. One swiftly wrote something down on a notepad. "Christine," the prosecutor moved in, closer, "can you tell the jury how that made you feel?" Her laughter was brief, bitter. "How did it make me feel? Betrayed. Totally betrayed. This wasn't about money. This was about trust. We created a life together. We invested everything in this family. And he was juggling money around like we didn't even exist." She faced him now, her tone firm but angry. "You gazed into our eyes, Kody. You said we were safe. You said we were on the same team. But you made financial decisions that plunged us into debt, while you were off making deals we knew nothing about." Kody finally raised his eyes. His skin was ashen, but his face gave nothing away. "Objection," his attorney broke in, standing. "Speculation. Sustained," the judge replied calmly. "Christine, simply state what you yourself saw or heard." Christine nodded, though the flames of her eyes didn't waver. I have seen the transfers. I've seen the accounts. And when I questioned him about them, he said to leave it alone. He said it wasn't my business to question him. That's when I realized that this was more than a misunderstanding. He was keeping something from me. The prosecutor placed a stack of documents in front of her. Christine, can you recognize these documents? She thumbed through them, shaking her head slowly. These are the bank statements I located. These are the transfers I speak of. Your Honor, the prosecutor indicated, we'd like to enter these into evidence. Admitted, the judge replied, and the clerk formally marked them. The defense attorney rose, prepared to cross-examine. But before he could start, Christine said one final thing that made the whole courtroom gasp. I didn't want to do this, she replied, her voice breaking now. But if I don't say anything, my children grow up believing this is acceptable. That it's acceptable to keep things from the people you love. That it's acceptable to lie if it's for the greater good. I can't let that be their lesson. She exited the stand, her face streaming with tears, and walked away from Kody without glancing in his direction. The ensuing silence was oppressive. You could sense the weight of her words hanging over all the people seated in that room like a storm cloud getting ready to pour. Kody's attorney stood up for the cross-examination. His tone silky. Christine, you indicated you weren't allowed access to those accounts, right? Yes, she replied. Her jaw clenched. So isn't it possible that you might have misinterpreted what those transfers were for, considering you weren't part of the business aspects of the family accounts? I didn't misinterpret, she retorted. I may not have been a part of it, but I can count. And the numbers don't lie. The lawyer smiled faintly, as though expecting that answer. And you're testifying today, after having separated from Kody, correct? Yes. So, is it possible that some of what you're saying today comes from anger? From a desire to hurt him? Christine's eyes narrowed. I'm angry, yes. But I'm not lying. If telling the truth hurts him, that's because of what he did, not because of me. There was a silence. A long, strained silence, and then the lawyer nodded and sat down. The judge ordered a brief recess, and the courtroom erupted into cacophony. Reporters spilled out into the hallway to spread the word. Social media exploded immediately. Hashtags such as #ChristineSpeaks and #CodyTrial trending in minutes. Christine remained seated, panting, her hands still trembling slightly. Kody refused to look at her. He sat there, eyes straight forward, face impassive. But the harm was done. The jury had heard her, and now everyone was holding their breath to hear what the next witness, Janelle, had to say. The bailiff's voice boomed out for the third time, announcing the court as a session. The hum of the crowd gradually faded away, as everyone sat down, tension building like static electricity in the air. The judge indicated to the prosecutor, "Call your next witness." "Your Honor," the prosecutor replied. "The state calls Janelle Brown." A shiver of anticipation ran through the courtroom. Journalists edged forward. Onlookers shifted in their seats. Janelle stood and walked deliberately toward the stand, her face serious but resolute. Unlike Christine, who had become visibly upset, Janelle's face was calm, nearly icy. She raised her hand, took the oath, and sat. The prosecutor did not hesitate. "Mrs. Brown," he asked, "how long had you been taking care of the family finances?" "Pretty much from the start," Janelle replied, her voice firm. "I did most of the bookkeeping for many years, until Kody began doing some of the accounts himself." The prosecutor nodded. "And what did you observe about those accounts after he began doing them?" Janelle glanced briefly at Kody before answering. "Patterns," she said, "patterns that didn't make sense. Money disappearing from joint accounts, expenses that no one had approved. Large transfers labeled as business investments, but with no receipts or proof of purchase." The prosecutor held up a stack of folders. "Mrs. Brown, are these the records you're referring to?" "Yes," Janelle replied, her jaw clenching. "These are my records, the ones I kept for myself, because I knew one day this would see the light." Those words struck like a thunderbolt. Whispers spread through the room. Even Christine's eyes grew wide as if she hadn't realized that Janelle had maintained physical evidence. The prosecutor produced the records to the clerk, who entered them into evidence. "Mrs. Brown, said the prosecutor. Could you tell the jury what these records indicate? Yeah, Janelle said, opening one of the folders. Her hands were firm, her tone harder with each passing sentence. This report indicates $25,000 taken out of our general account into one of Kody's private accounts, an account which none of us even knew was there. Here's another, $40,000 transferred a few weeks after to the same place. And here, $15,000 for house repairs that never took place. The prosecutor allowed that to linger for a moment before asking, "And did you address Mr. Brown on these transfers?" "I did," Janelle replied stiffly. "I took him the documents. I told him these figures didn't balance." "Do you know what he told me?" "What did he tell you?" "Told me." She looked at Kody now, her tone cold, to quit snooping. "That I was making drama where there was none. Told me he was doing what was best for the family." Janelle's serenity cracked, only slightly, as she spoke more loudly. "But better for whom? We had children who didn't have health insurance. We had mortgages over our heads. And he was transferring money behind our backs." The jury remained stunned. Even the judge's face showed the slightest flash of emotion. The prosecutor retreated, allowing the weight of Janelle's words to sink into the air before proceeding. "Mrs. Brown, did you ever discover where this money was being sent?" "Yes." The lone word hung heavy, charged with emotion. "And where was it being sent?" Janelle did not flinch. "Real estate investments, properties none of us had ever laid eyes on, vacant land, luxury cabins, even a rental house in another state, all in his name. None of it in the family's." The courtroom exploded. Gallery members grumbled, shook their heads, even gasped out loud. The judge had to hit her gavel 3 times to regain control. Janelle wasn't done. "And when I said to him that we couldn't afford this," she said, her voice building, "he said trust him. He said I didn't have the vision to know where he was taking us." Her fingers closed the railing of the witness stand. But what vision drives a family into bankruptcy? The pause was so profound it was nearly hollow-sounding. The prosecutor nodded gravely. No further questions. Kody's attorney stood up slowly, ironing out his jacket. "Mrs. Brown," he started gently, "you mentioned you kept these records in secret. Isn't that the case?" "Yes." "So you were monitoring your husband's money behind his back?" Janelle's eyes grew narrow. "I was protecting my children." "But isn't it possible," the lawyer persisted, "that some of these transfers were legitimate investments in the family's future?" Janelle didn't flinch. "If they were legitimate, why conceal them? Why not tell us? Why lie?" The attorney moved in closer, speaking softly. "You've been apart from Mr. Brown for months now. Isn't it correct that you could have a personal motive for wanting him punished?" Janelle's reply was a knife. "I don't want him punished. I want him held accountable. There's a difference." The attorney paused, nodding, then moved back. No further questions. The judge waved Janelle off, and on her way back to her seat, there was a palpable tension in the air. Christine grabbed hold of her hand and squeezed. Meri nodded the slightest approval. Kody sat rigid, but his jaw was so tightly clenched that it appeared to be painful. The prosecutor looked at his papers and smiled weakly. "Your Honor, the state's next witness will be Meri Brown." The courtroom had been so silent you could have heard the soft hum of the air conditioning. As Meri stood up, in contrast to Christine's emotional state, and that of Janelle, which had been hot-headed, Meri was completely different. Composed almost unrealistically so. She clicked her heels sharply on the floor as she walked towards the stand. Every step a countdown to explosion. The audience in the court shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The jurors straightened too, feeling they were in for something special. Meri placed her right hand on the Bible, took the oath, and sat down in a posture so stiff it seemed she'd been sculpted out of rock. The prosecutor moved closer. "Mrs. Brown, how long have you known the defendant?" Meri didn't flinch. "Since I was 19, she replied flatly. "I was his first wife. I've known him longer than anyone here in the room." That hit hard. The jurors looked at each other, curious. "And over the course of those years," the prosecutor asked cautiously, "how would you characterize your relationship?" Meri's lips twisted into something that was more than a scowl, but less than a smile. "Initially, good. We were a unit. We imagined together, plotted together, constructed everything from the beginning. But as time passed, I began to see some shifts. He became secretive, controlling. The prosecutor nodded. Did the changes encompass finances? Oh, definitely, Meri replied, her tone slicing through the air. At the beginning, we talked about everything together. Every penny spent, every decision made. But somewhere down the line, he quit telling me things. Decisions were being made without me. Money would just vanish. She leaned in a little closer. And when I questioned things, I was told to stay in my lane, to let him handle the big picture. The room fell silent. Even Kody seemed a little self-conscious now, his shoulders tense. Meri, the prosecutor said softly, can you describe for the jury the moment you knew something was seriously wrong? Meri took a deep breath, as if she'd been restraining the memory for years. It happened about 2 years ago, she said. Then I received a notice in the mail for a property tax bill, for ground we didn't even know we owned. When I questioned Kody about it, he waved it off, told me it was an investment. But then I received a second notice. And then a third. And I realized he'd been purchasing properties, with family funds, without so much as a word to us. She pulled out of a folder a pile of letters. These are the notices. These are the bills that we were supposed to pay, even though we never authorized the purchases. The prosecutor took them with care, and tendered them as evidence. Meri, he said, why didn't you bring this forward before now? Her eyes turned cold. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what it would do to the family. Afraid of what it would do to me. For years I didn't speak, because I figured keeping the peace was greater than the truth. Her voice turned icy now. But keeping the peace just allowed the problem to grow. And by the time I did finally tell them the truth, it was too late. Kody shifted restlessly, his attorney putting a hand on his arm, as if to restrain him. Meri, the prosecutor spoke gently. How do you feel today, sitting there in this courtroom? Meri swiveled her head, slowly, deliberately, until her gaze was fixed on Kody's. Angry, she said. She spoke quietly, but the words were heard as clearly as a gunshot. Angry that I let him silence me for so long. Angry that I took his word, when he said everything was all right. Angry that I covered up for him to the children, to our friends, to the world, when he'd been lying to all of them. She did not glance aside. You lied, Kody, and you know you lied. You stole our trust, and you shattered it. And now here we are. The gallery fell silent, as if no one dared breathe. The prosecutor nodded. No further questions. It was the defense attorney's turn, and he stood up slowly, as if hesitantly. Meri, he said, his voice gentle, you've been through a lot with Mr. Brown, haven't you? Yes, and in more recent years, your marriage has dissolved. Yes, she replied, matter-of-factly. So is there a possibility that some of the anger you are carrying today is about the dissolution of that relationship? Not money? Meri's head canted to one side, as if a predator sizing up prey. I'm angry over a number of things. But I'm here for the money. I'm here because of what he did, not because of what we were. The lawyer nodded slowly. And you acknowledge that you remained silent for years, despite your claim of being aware of these problems. Yes, I remained silent, because I wanted to believe he was what he claimed to be. That doesn't make me a liar. That makes me loyal. Too loyal. There was a silence, thick with significance. No further questions, the lawyer said softly, sitting down. Meri sat for another moment longer, still fixed on Kody, before she finally got up and returned to her seat. The whole courtroom breathed a collective sigh, as if they had been holding their breath all the while she was on the witness stand. The judge regarded the prosecutor. Call your next witness. The prosecutor smiled slightly, as if he had been anticipating this moment. Your Honor, he stated, the state has some new evidence they would like to present before the next witness. Emails, private correspondence between Mr. Brown and one of his business associates. The words detonated like an explosive. Emails? The defense attorney exclaimed, rising to his feet. Your Honor, we have not had a chance to review this evidence. You will have time, the judge instructed strongly. But if the prosecution feels these are pertinent, we will hear them. The prosecutor nodded, and faced the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, these emails will demonstrate to you precisely what Mr. Brown was doing, and precisely how much he knew he was doing with the money he was transferring. They will demonstrate intent. The gallery erupted into whispers, reporters scrambling to their computers to release the headline first. Secret emails to be revealed in Kody Brown trial. Kody's face blanched. He huddled close to his attorney, whispering frantically, his lips clamped tight. Whatever was contained in those emails, he knew it was going to be ugly. The judge adjourned to permit both sides to consider the documents. As the courtroom cleared, the tension was stifling. People moved out slowly, a buzz with rumor. Meri sat beside Janelle and Christine, her expression iron. For the first time in weeks, Kody appeared shaken. And everyone in that courtroom knew, whatever was in those emails, they might be the instant that would make all the difference. The name struck the courtroom like a lightning bolt. If Janelle was the backbone and Christine the heart of the family, then Meri was its founding cornerstone. The first wife, the one who'd been with Kody from the very start. All the cameras in the room turned to her as she rose slowly, her face inscrutable, and started her walk across to the witness stand. Journalists' fingers danced across keyboards. Twitter exploded all over again. This was the evidence everybody had been waiting to see, and they all knew it might just finish off the case. The courtroom was fuller than ever when the session resumed. Reporters had been filing updates frantically during the recess, and now each and every camera in the room was focused on the prosecutor's table. Even those who weren't following the trial closely were watching the live streams now. The judge arrived, sat down, and the gavel came down once. Court is back in session. Mr. Prosecutor, you may proceed. The prosecutor stood up slowly, and he held aloft a thick pile of printed pages. Your Honor, members of the jury, he declared, what you are going to hear is not guesswork. It is not inference. It is Mr. Brown's own words. The atmosphere in the room was charged. These, he went on, cradling the stack a bit higher, are emails between Mr. Brown and his business partner, stamped with dates spanning 6 months. These were legally obtained by subpoena. They chronicle the transfer of tens of thousands of dollars from shared family accounts to personal accounts. He approached the jury box and put a copy of the first email on the evidence display. Let me read you one, he said. The courtroom came forward in a lean as his voice resounded, steady and clear. Move the funds before the wives find out. If they ask questions, I'll handle it. This has to look clean. The room exploded. Gasps, shouts, even a muffled scream from somewhere in the gallery. The judge rapped her gavel again and again. Order, there will be order in this courtroom. The prosecutor paused until quietness fell, and then went on. This is not a one-time email, he declared, turning to the next page. Here's another. Keep the withdrawals below $10K at one time. Anything above that will raise eyebrows, and they'll begin asking for explanations. Christine's hand flew to her mouth. Janelle closed her eyes briefly, as if to keep from crying. Meri's face was stone, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the bench. The prosecutor turned back to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not the language of a man who was simply misunderstood. This is the language of someone deliberately hiding transactions. This is intent. Kody's attorney leapt to his feet. Objection, these emails are being misconstrued. The judge's eyebrow rose. Mr. Brown will be able to defend them when he testifies. In the meantime, they are accepted into evidence. Kody sat frozen in place, but his face was white, his jaw ground as if he was champing his teeth, and one hand gripped the arm of his chair so tightly that his knuckles were white against his skin. The prosecutor was not finished. There's more, he continued. In this email, Mr. Brown writes, and I quote, once the money is moved, tell them it went into a joint investment. They won't check the details. They'll believe what I tell them. That was it. The courtroom erupted into chaos once again. People were screaming, some rising to their feet, some gesturing wildly at Kody. The bailiff had to intervene and shout for people to sit down. Kody's attorney leaned in close, speaking in a hushed tone into his ear. Whatever he told him, Kody shook his head quickly. His composure was lost now. His face was flushed. His breathing was shallow. His eyes racing about as if he was cornered. The prosecutor laid the pile of papers on the evidence table. These emails speak for themselves, he said. Matter-of-factly, the jury can examine them in full. But I ask you, does this sound like a man operating in good faith? Or does it sound like someone who knew precisely what he was doing and how to cover his tracks? He took a step back, allowing the gravity of his words to settle in. The defense lawyer rose, obviously shaken, but attempting to retain composure. Members of the jury, he said, these emails appear incriminating, but I ask you to look at context. These were business communications. Business sometimes necessitates discretion. These remarks, while maybe inartfully phrased, do not establish criminal intent. He turned to Kody. Mr. Brown, is there anything you'd like to say? For a long moment, Kody didn't move. The courtroom was silent, waiting. Then slowly he stood. I never stole from my family, he affirmed. His voice coarse but emphatic enough to be heard. I did what I believed was right. I made difficult decisions, decisions that no one else wanted to make. Yes, I moved money. Yes, I invested money. But I did it for them, in order to build a future, to leave them something better. His voice grew loud, resounding across the room. You believe I wanted this? You believe I wanted to sit here and be accused of being a thief by those I gave everything for? There were tears in his eyes now, whether from rage or anguish it was difficult to say. Christine slowly shook her head, her own eyes brimming with tears. Janelle glared at the floor, not wanting to meet his eye. Meri's face was impassive, though her jaw clamped hard as stone. The judge banged the gavel. Mr. Brown, you will get your turn to testify. Sit down for now. Kody gulped for air, hesitated, then sat down. The prosecutor nodded once more to the judge. Your Honor, the state rests for today. Tomorrow we'll call our next witness. The judge recessed the court for the day, and the room exploded into chaos as soon as she departed. Reporters ran for the doors. News anchors launched into live television preparations, and social media started buzzing with photos of the leaked email clips. #Kody emails was trending within minutes. Outside, demonstrators and backers yelled over each other, some calling for justice, others claiming Kody was being framed. In the courtroom, Kody remained seated for a few minutes before eventually rising and leaving, accompanied by his attorneys. His face was a maelstrom, anger, fear, defiance, all vying for supremacy. This was not merely a trial anymore. This was a public spectacle, and the world couldn't turn away. Tomorrow would find cross-examination, additional witnesses, and perhaps, at last, the day when Kody would testify on the stand. But one thing was certain, the secret emails had turned everything around. Morning dawned over the courthouse, but it didn't feel like morning. It felt like a war zone. News trucks lined every available parking space. Cameramen battled for positions. Commentators went on air every few minutes with fresh reports, even if they didn't have anything. Prosters stood outside, shaking signs that said justice for the wives. And free Kody. The crowd was larger than ever, a mix of outraged locals, curious onlookers, and die-hard reality TV fans who had flown in just to see history happen. The trial had turned overnight from a legal process to an international event. Social media was ablaze. #Kody emails, #family betrayal, and #Brown trial were trending in several countries. Everyone was weighing in, some labeling Kody as a manipulator, some as the victim of a smear campaign. Memes were pouring onto TikTok and Twitter. In a small meeting room, Kody sat with his legal team. He hadn't slept. His hair was not combed, his shirt slightly wrinkled, far from the smooth image he had maintained during the initial stages of the trial. His principle continued first. We must manage the narrative. The emails don't look good, I will admit to that. But if we can position this as financial strategy rather than deceit, then the jury may be reluctant to convict. Kody struck his hand against the table. They made me sound like a criminal, like I was hiding behind their backs. But that's not what occurred. One of the junior lawyers said hesitantly. With all due respect, Mr. Brown, those words in the email, before the wives find out, are very difficult to spin. Kody's jaw clenched. I didn't mean it literally. They were panicking about every little decision. I just wanted to make things easier. If I told them every detail, they'd never agree to anything. The lead lawyer leaned forward. Then that's your story. That's what you tell on the stand. That you were shielding them from unnecessary stress and not concealing money for yourself. Kody slowly nodded, though his fists remained clenched. When court resumed, the air was charged with tension. The jury was tired but attentive, obviously sensing how enormous the news of yesterday had been. The prosecutor took the stand first. Your Honor, the state would like to bring a forensic accountant to the witness stand. This witness was matter-of-fact, meticulous, and devastating. With charts, spreadsheets, and bank statements, she dissected each dollar that had gone in and out of the accounts of Kody. This isn't ordinary business activity, she asserted. The pattern is evident. These deals were structured in a way to prevent triggering bank reporting rules. This is textbook structuring activity, the type we see where a person does not want to show the money stream. She indicated towards a graph on the screen. Observe that each of these transfers is exactly under $10,000. That is not accident. That is intent. Kody's defense objected, arguing that the witness was interpreting motives, but the judge allowed the testimony. When it was the defense's turn to cross-examine, Kody's attorney tried to poke holes. You're saying Mr. Brown's actions were criminal. But isn't it true that business owners often make multiple smaller transfers for perfectly legal reasons? Yes, the witness conceded, but not typically in a manner that avoids reporting thresholds so methodically. This is intentional. Kody's lawyer nodded, then addressed the jury again. You see, ladies and gentlemen, there is a distinction between something that appears suspicious and something that is criminal. Suspicion is not proof. But the jurors' expressions did not relent. At lunchtime, the media firestorm hit a new high. One of the big networks aired a special report featuring clips from previous episodes of reality shows starring Kody, edited side by side with his quotes from the emails. The impact was harsh. The public gobbled it up, and even some of Kody's former supporters were starting to turn against him. Back in the courthouse, the air was charged. Christine and Janelle hushed one another in the gallery. Meri sat quietly, eyes fixed directly in front of her. When court reconvened, the judge glanced at both tables. Will the defense be presenting any witnesses today? Yes, Your Honor, said Kody's lawyer. But first, Mr. Brown would like to speak to the court. A hush ran through the room. This wasn't under oath yet, only a statement. Kody rose, buttoned his jacket, and faced the jury. I know what those emails look like, he stated, his voice firm now, near to pleading. I know how they read on paper, but I am not a thief. I am a father. I am a husband. Or at least, was. I made decisions that I believed would secure my family's future. Perhaps I made them the wrong manner. Perhaps I should have been more transparent. But I never ever intended to hurt the people I care about. He spun to face Christine, Janelle, and Meri. You know me, he whispered. You know who I am. Don't let a few sentences on a page erase 20 years of what we created together. The courtroom held its breath. The jurors watched him intently, some sympathetically, some skeptically. When he took a seat, his attorney leaned over and whispered something into his ear, probably words of encouragement. But Kody didn't react. He simply gazed down at the table, lost in thought. The prosecutor took a look at the jury and said matter-of-factly, tomorrow we call our final witness. Those words had impact. Whoever this final witness was, it seemed plain that the prosecution felt they could close the case. Outside the courthouse, the argument continued. Commentators were divided. Some described Kody's speech as emotional, while others painted it as a last-ditch effort to win over the jury. By nightfall, cable news networks were airing countdown clocks. Final witness. What will happen next? Not even Kody's lawyers were able to keep calm. In private, they brainstormed late at night. We have to be ready for anything, the lead attorney said grimly. If they're saving this witness for last, it means they think this is their knockout punch. Kody nodded, though his face was grim. Then I'll be ready. Whatever they throw at me, I'll face it. But deep down, a cold dread was settling in his stomach. Because in a case such as this, a single last witness might be the difference between liberty and losing everything. The morning after, the courthouse resembled a pressure cooker waiting to burst. The line to enter wound around the block, and helicopters buzzed overhead. It was finally here, the day that everyone had been waiting for. Inside, the gallery was shoulder to shoulder. Representatives from big-name outlets had flown in overnight. Even a couple of former Sister Wives cast members had been seen outside, declining to comment, but obviously there to witness the fireworks. When the judge walked in and called the courtroom to order, you could sense every one of them in the room, holding their breath. The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, the state calls its final witness." There was a moment of silence, just long enough to allow tension to build. And then he spoke the name, Mr. Nathan Willis. The room erupted with sound. Gasps, murmurs, even the occasional audible curse. Nathan Willis, Kody's old business partner. The man who had once served Kody as his right hand. The one who took care of the arrangements, the money, the behind-scenes quiet decisions. He had not been publicly visible for months. Some had guessed he'd left the state altogether. And now he stood before her, stumbling slowly to the stand. Kody's face went pale. His jaw clenched as he mumbled something inaudible under his breath to his lawyer. Nathan held up his right hand, took the oath, and sat. He had a calm but serious look, as if he had been shouldering this burden for a long time. The prosecutor stepped in. "Mr. Willis, how many years did you work with Mr. Brown?" "Nigh on 10 years, Nathan replied. "And what was your job?" "I did the business accounts. I did the transfers, paid the bills, transferred funds when Kody instructed me to." The prosecutor nodded. "Mr. Willis, did you transfer funds from joint family accounts to private accounts at the direction of Mr. Brown?" "Yes." The single syllable seemed to reverberate throughout the courtroom. "Can you tell the jury why?" Nathan breathed slowly. "Because Kody instructed me to." He said the wives weren't supposed to be informed about every decision, that if they knew what was really bringing in, they'd begin requesting larger portions. He said it would be simpler to just keep it silent. Kody bashed his hand on the table. "That's not true," he bellowed. The judge struck the gavel. "Mr. Brown, you will be silent or you will be removed from this courtroom." Kody's lawyer leaned over, whispering in a furious tone, until Kody finally settled back, his chest panting with rage. The prosecutor addressed Nathan again. "Mr. Willis, did you ever have any concerns about what Mr. Brown was requiring you to do?" "Yes. I reminded him several times it seemed fishy, that we could get in trouble. And he assured me not to worry, that he had it all under control." Nathan swallowed hard, his fingers clutching the sides of the witness stand. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe he was doing the right thing. But the more I saw, the more I realized he was lying. To me, to the wives, to everyone. "Do you have evidence of these conversations?" "Yeah," Nathan replied, producing a USB drive. "I archived some of the texts he sent me. I did not want to, but I suppose a part of me knew this day would arrive." The prosecutor plugged the USB into a laptop and put one of the texts on the courtroom screen. "Just transfer the money, Nathan. If they inquire, say it's for the Coyote Pass transaction. They won't even ask questions." The jury leaned forward, reading each word. "Mr. Willis," said the prosecutor, "why are you here today testifying?" Nathan's voice cracked a little. "Because I can't keep it inside anymore. I lied for him long enough. I stayed quiet because I believed I was covering for the family. What I was actually doing was assisting him in taking from them. And I can't do that anymore." Christine began to sob quietly. Janelle covered her face. Even Meri, who had held it together for the majority of the trial, blinked repeatedly, as if suppressing tears. The prosecutor nodded slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Willis. No further questions." The defense attorney rose, attempting to recover. "Mr. Willis," he asked, "isn't it a fact that you were offered immunity for your testimony?" "Yes," Nathan acknowledged. "Then you have every reason to say what the prosecution needs you to say, to protect yourself." Nathan shook his head. "No, I have every reason to be truthful, because the truth is the only thing that's going to allow me to sleep tonight." The defense attorney leaned harder. "But you might be lying to me now, couldn't you?" "I could," Nathan replied. "But I'm not, and Kody knows that." He slowly swiveled his head, meeting Kody's gaze in the courtroom. The quiet was oppressive. Kody's jaw was clenched. His fists flexed on the table so tightly that his knuckles seemed about to burst through his skin. The defense attorney said no more. He sat down with a tight face. The judge dismissed Nathan from the stand, and as he walked by Kody's table, Kody said something derogatory under his breath that no one else overheard. But Nathan stood stock still for half a second before walking on out the door. The prosecutor faced the judge. "Your Honor, the state rests its case." Those words sounded like a bell ringing. This was it. The prosecution was finished. The judge surveyed the jury. "We will reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments. Until then, you are dismissed." The courtroom exploded into chaos the moment the gavel hit the desk. Outside, the crowd was more boisterous than ever. News anchors were already referring to Nathan Willis's testimony as the bombshell that could decide the verdict. In a side room, Kody finally lost it. "This is a witch hunt," he exclaimed, pounding his fist on the table so hard that one of the coffee cups was knocked over and spilled. "Nathan was nothing without me. He's lying because he wants to save his own skin." His lawyer attempted to soothe him. "Kody, listen to me. Tomorrow is closing arguments. You must remain calm before that jury. If they witness you lose your temper, they'll think you're guilty." Kody paced back and forth in the room like a trapped animal. "I can't just sit there and let them shred me." "You must," the lawyer said firmly. "You're running out of time." Kody ceased his pacing, gazing at the wall, panting. Tomorrow would be the last opportunity to persuade the jury. One final try before they sentenced him to death. And after Nathan's testimony, the crushing pressure bearing down on Kody's shoulders almost became too much to handle. Because for the first time since the trial started, he wasn't certain he was going to win. The courtroom was hushed when the judge walked in for what everyone knew would be one of the most significant days of the entire trial. The gavel came down once, as sharp as a gunshot. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," declared the judge, "today you will receive closing arguments from the prosecution and from the defense. You are reminded that closing arguments are not evidence, but they are intended to assist you in interpreting the evidence you have already heard." The prosecutor took the first step. His suit was new, his posture erect, and he walked with the gravitas of a man who knew he was getting ready to give the speech of a lifetime. He moved to the middle of the courtroom, slowly turning toward the jury. "When this trial started," he said, "I told you this case was about trust, about betrayal. And now, after weeks of testimony, hundreds of pages of evidence, and hours of witnesses, you have seen exactly what that betrayal looks like." He took a step forward, toward the jury box, his voice firm but increasing more forcefully with each word. "You've read the emails. You've listened to the accountants. You've heard the wives. The same people that this man was charged with protecting. And then you heard from Nathan Willis, the guy who obeyed Kody Brown's commands. He told you straight out what was going on behind the scenes." He took up a sheet of paper from the table, one of Kody's emails, and held it aloft. "These are not the words of an honest man. These are not the words of a man acting in good faith. These are the words of someone who knew what he was doing was wrong. Move the funds before the wives find out." He left the words suspended. "Members of the jury, you have been presented with a straightforward choice. You can decide to believe that all of this, the secret transfers, the secret accounts, the partner who risked everything to testify, was nothing more than a misunderstanding. Or you can decide to acknowledge the truth right in front of you, that Kody Brown betrayed the people who trusted him most." His tone mellowed now, nearly begging. "This isn't simply about money, it's about responsibility. It's about speaking up and saying that no one, regardless of how well known, regardless of how influential, is beyond the law." He turned and gestured briefly toward Kody. "Don't let him talk his way out of this one. Don't let him weasel his way out of responsibility. Hold him responsible. Give the wives, give this family, their justice." He took a step back, inclining toward the judge. "The state rests." The courtroom fell silent for a very long time before Kody's lead attorney arose. He approached the same place in front of the jury, his tone soft, even gentle. "Members of the jury," he started, "you just heard a stirring speech, an emotional one, but emotion is not evidence. Anger is not proof. And pain, however genuine, is not equivalent to guilt." He nodded toward Kody. "You've watched my client sit here, day after day, while the whole world has judged him. You've heard the terms fraud and betrayal. You've heard from those people who don't stand behind him anymore. But what you've not heard is evidence sufficient to convict him beyond a reasonable doubt of having committed a crime. He held up the same email that had been read by the prosecutor. Yes, these words appear bad, but emails don't tell the whole story. You've been shown one side of this narrative. A story carefully constructed to make Kody Brown look like a villain. But ask yourselves, who benefits from that narrative? Nathan Willis, a man who was granted immunity to save himself. Christine, Janelle, and Meri, 3 women who have been public about their grievances for years. Isn't it possible that they view this as an opportunity to finally hold him accountable? He stepped closer, speaking in a lower tone. Kody Brown isn't perfect. He might have erred. He might have made choices you or I wouldn't have made. But that doesn't render him a criminal. That renders him human. He gazed at Kody now. And today, for the first time, you will hear from him personally. The courtroom hummed in shock. Kody hadn't testified yet. This was his time. He rose slowly, buttoned his suit, and made his way to the witness stand. Following his swearing in, he faced the jury. "I know what you've heard about me," he stated, his voice firm but low. "I know how this must appear, but I need you to hear it from me. I never stole from my family. I never betrayed them. All of the things I did, all of the decisions, all of the transfers, I did because I believed it was the right thing to do." He swallowed hard, his voice choked now. "Yes, I embezzled funds. Yes, I made decisions without consulting everyone. But do you have any idea what it's like to be the one person with all the responsibility of keeping everything going? To have everyone relying on you to keep the family safe, to pay the bills, to provide for food on the table, roofs over everyone's heads. I did what I had to do." He addressed the wives on the gallery. "Christine, Janelle, Meri. Sorry I hurt you. Sorry I made you feel like you weren't included in the decision. I was wrong to exclude you. But I didn't do this to hurt you. I did this to keep you safe." Christine looked down and wiped tears from her eyes. Janelle kept her face averted. Meri was rigid and steady, gazing at him unemotionally. Kody turned back toward the jury. "You've watched me on television. You've watched me stumble, watch me fall apart. But you've also watched me love my family. I love them, I love all of them. And I am begging you, don't take everything away from me because of a mistake. Please." He spoke in a low, desperate voice when he was finished. And the courtroom fell silent. The judge excused him from the witness stand. And Kody strode back to the defense table, sitting down hard. The judge turned to the jury. "You will be sequestered now to deliberate. You have to consider all the evidence you have observed and heard. When you have decided, report the verdict to the court." The jury filed out, their faces serious. Beyond the courtroom, the world waited. Reporters broadcast live every few minutes with news. "The jury is out. We may have a verdict in hours, or days." Behind a small holding room door, Kody sat beside his attorneys. His hands were folded tightly, his leg pumping anxiously. "How long do you think they'll be out?" he asked. "No way to know," said his lawyer. "It could be immediate. It could be days. It all depends on if they agree immediately, or if there's conflict in the room." Kody sat back in his chair, gazing up at the ceiling. "Conflict," he grumbled. "I just need one of them to agree with me." Christine, Janelle, and Meri sat in the hallway, all 3 sitting together, and talking softly. "Do you think they'll convict him?" Janelle asked. Christine shrugged. "I don't know. I just hope they see the truth." Meri said nothing. She sat there quietly, arms crossed, face a blank mask. Hours went by. The courthouse remained crowded. Reporters milling about in the halls, cameras stationed by every door. And then, just as night was starting to fall, word arrived. The following morning, the courthouse was a fortress. A crowd of reporters stood on the steps, microphones held high, broadcasting to millions watching live. Supporters of the Brown family waved posters and signs, some pleading for justice, others asking for mercy. The air inside was an electric tension. The jury had worked late into the night and sent a message that they were ready. The clerk of the judge brought the news, and the courtroom within an hour was filled to the brim. Family members, media, lawyers, and random strangers who simply wanted to see history. Kody came in last. He appeared as though he hadn't slept. His hair was disheveled, his complexion pale, The calm, composed man who had entered on the first day of trial wasn't there anymore. His eyes swept over the courtroom, settling for a moment on Christine, Janelle, and Meri. They didn't turn away, but they didn't smile either. "All rise," the bailiff shouted. Everyone rose as the judge came in, his face as inscrutable as ever. "You are seated," he instructed. He addressed the bailiff. "Bring in the jury." The door swung open, and 12 women and men walked in. They neither looked at Kody nor the wives, their faces revealing nothing. The foreman held a single crumpled piece of paper. The judge nodded. "Madam Foreperson, has the jury found a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor," she replied, her voice calm but soft. "Please give the verdict to the bailiff." The room was so quiet you could hear the paper rustling as it was handed to the judge. He read it once and then returned it to the bailiff. "Will the defendant rise?" Kody stood, his hands white-knuckled gripped the table. His attorney stood beside him, tense but calm. The judge glances at the foreperson of the jury. "Please read the verdict." The foreperson opens the paper. "On the count of fraud," she says, her voice sounding across the courtroom. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Kody Brown." The silence seemed to stretch on forever. You could almost hear the entire world holding its breath. "Guilty." Gasps erupted in the gallery. Christine's hands went to her mouth. Janelle shut her eyes and breathed shakily. Meri just sat there, staring straight ahead. Frozen. Kody's expression went utterly blank, as if the words hadn't sunk in. Then slowly he shook his head, whispering, "No, no, it can't be." His attorney put a hand on his arm, murmuring something, but Kody hardly caught the words. The sound of the courtroom exploded. Journalists sprinting out to write their articles, spectators murmuring, the judge banging his gavel to restore order. "Order," the judge yelled. "Order in the court." Gradually the room hushed. "Kody Brown," the judge instructed, "you have been found guilty of fraud. Sentencing will occur in 30 days. Bail is hereby revoked. You are remanded into custody until sentencing." The bailiff moved forward and handcuffed Kody's wrists. Kody finally faced the wives for the first time. "This isn't over," he stated, his voice cracking. "You think this is justice? You think this is the truth? The truth hasn't even been told yet." Christine wept openly. Janelle's mouth shook, but she said nothing. Meri's face was stony, almost impassive. The bailiff started to usher Kody toward the rear exit of the courtroom. All the cameras accompanied him, all the journalists writing in haste. He paused one final time, glancing over his shoulder at the judge. "I will appeal," he declared. "You haven't heard the last of me." And with that, he was gone. On the steps outside, the courthouse became a war zone of words. Some supporters cheered, yelling, "Justice for the wives." Others wept, clutching signs that read, "Free Kody." Social media was ablaze like fire. Hashtags such as #KodyBrown, verdict, #Brown family justice, and #guilty, or innocent trended globally. Christine eventually emerged, with Janelle and Meri by her side. The crowd surged. Microphones pushed into her face. "Christine, what do you think of the verdict?" One reporter bellowed. Christine breathed deeply, tears welling in her eyes. "This wasn't about revenge," she said quietly. "This was about the truth. And today I feel like we finally got it." Janelle nodded. "This was the hardest thing we've ever done. But it had to be done." Meri didn't speak at all. She just walked past the reporters, her face unreadable, leaving everyone guessing what she truly felt. Inside the holding cell, Kody sat on a bench, his head in his hands. He could still hear the cheers and the chants outside the courthouse. He could still see Christine's tears, Janelle's quiet resolve, Meri's cold stare. "They think they've won," he muttered to himself. Then slowly, he lifted his head, a flicker of determination in his eyes. "This isn't the end," he whispered. "This is just the beginning." The camera would have cut there, if this were a documentary, the ultimate cliffhanger for viewers. The question now was not simply whether Kody would prevail on his appeal. It was whether the truth he continued to assert he possessed would ever actually come out, and whether the Brown family could ever recover from what had just transpired.